We start with breaking news: legal heat engulfing Donald Trump. Donald Trump is in some real trouble in the classified documents probe, as more legal vets predict an indictment is coming, even jail time. New exclusive bombshell reporting from the Washington Post. Trump workers reportedly moving a Mar-a-Lago box one day before the DOJ came for the documents, and allegedly carried out a, quote, dress rehearsal for moving sensitive papers even before his office received the May 2022 subpoena. This new information showing calculated moves by the Trump team directly undercuts Trump's argument that he didn't think he was doing anything wrong. Remember, he told Sean Hannity he declassified the documents with his mind.
I did declassify, yes.
Okay. Is there a process? What was your process to declassify?
It doesn't have to be a process, as I understand it. You know, there's different people say different things, but as I understand, there doesn't have to be. If you're the president of the United States, you can declassify just by saying it's declassified, even by thinking about it.
Yeah, he's not Professor X. That's not a thing. The Washington Post reporting investigators have come to view the Trump team's actions and timing as suspicious and an indication of possible obstruction. Shocker. This coming on the heels of reports that special counsel Jack Smith is wrapping up the probe. Bloomberg reporting he is poised to announce possible criminal charges in the days or weeks after Memorial Day. Multiple outlets reporting Trump's allies are preparing for a federal indictment. Trump's lawyers making a last-minute plea to meet with Attorney General Merrick Garland, sending him a letter asking him to meet at his, quote, earliest convenience to discuss the ongoing injustice that is being perpetrated by your special counsel and his prosecutors. Look, it's clear Trump is rattled, already indicted on criminal charges in New York, and now facing a very real threat of another indictment from the DOJ. His former White House lawyer even predicting he will go to jail for obstruction. Joining me now is former federal prosecutor Renato Mariotti and Pulitzer Prize-winning Washington Post columnist Eugene Robinson. I will start with you, Eugene, because honestly, I just want a larger political perspective on this. I've never been a fan of saying, you know, okay, we know Trump's really in trouble now. But politically speaking, the most obvious crime that he has been committing all along, which is having documents he's hiding, what are the potential implications of this new reporting on his 2024 prospects and the number of Republicans who seem to still want to attach themselves to him?
Well, I'll give you my answer by speaking rather than just with my mind, like the president does with declassification. Look, the first indictment seems to have strengthened the bond between the Republican base, at least the MAGA base, and Donald Trump. I would not be surprised if that happened again with an indictment on the classified documents case. I would not be surprised. Now, Republicans who are detachable from Trump, Republicans who have already basically washed their hands of him, and perhaps more important, independents, if he gets to the general election, independents who might still have a question about Donald Trump. I can't imagine who that is. For them, yeah, this is a big deal. If you're indicted on federal charges for what you did with classified documents, who knows what the charges would be. But these are very serious charges. But as far as the MAGA base is concerned, I think it's going to be, you know, I'm being persecuted. Yes, he's being persecuted. It's the judiciary is weaponized, and go Trump.
This is shocking to me. Renato, the idea that Trump didn't know that he had all these documents had always been something that I didn't really buy. But the revelation that his people were sort of moving and shuffling things around with full knowledge that it was being looked for, that should make this more or less an open and shut case. And for the first time, we're hearing the words jail. What do you think the implications of that are for Trump's team? I mean, obviously they're concerned. They're trying to talk to Merrick Garland, but jail is a word that we really haven't heard associated with Trump since he left the White House 3 years ago.
Yeah, absolutely. Jason, you know, it wasn't just that they were moving documents. They were doing it the day before the FBI and DOJ was coming. I mean, it is very suspicious. You don't need to be a lawyer or prosecutor to see that, right? I think a jury would see through that right away. I do think this is totally different and much more serious than the Manhattan case. And I think part of it is because the penalty here would be a very significant prison sentence. If you just look at other people who've been sentenced for similar behavior, there's a contractor, a federal contractor, who kept documents in his home, willfully kept them in his home, and he went to prison for year. So I think, here where you have obstruction of justice and dress rehearsal, we just heard about a moment ago, you'd have to think it would be higher. And the president, I think, frankly, should be held more accountable. And I think a lot of judges would consider it that way. So I think Trump's lawyers right now scrambling, and with good reason. I would be the same way if I was on their legal team. I think this would be a very difficult case to defend. And purely from a legal perspective, I'm not Eugene. I'm not looking at it from a politics perspective. From a legal perspective, I think this has the number one problem that Trump has from a legal perspective by a country mile.
Renato, I want to follow up on this because this is a part of the reporting that actually was the biggest concern for me. Obviously the documents are terrible, but the idea that he was moving documents the day before the raid, my reaction to that is like, is there a leak? Was somebody giving him a heads up? Was that your reading of this as well? Because, look, it's one thing to have a practice, but if you're still doing this the day beforehand, that to me suggests, or there is a possibility that Trump may have been tipped off. Is that something that prosecutors and investigators may be concerned about?
The way I read it, Jason, was that this is before the initial visit. So, Donald Trump was not treated the way you would be treated or I would be treated. If me or one of my clients had classified documents in their house, the government would just come in and take them, right? There wouldn't be a fancy letter sent to you, a polite request. The FBI and DOJ wouldn't come for a friendly visit. They would come and take the stuff and arrest you. So they came for a visit. And I think that's what makes this really problematic for Trump. The day before they're coming to visit in a friendly way, he's moving documents there. I mean, that's very concerning. So that's how I read it. And I think it's very damning.
I want to turn to an update on accountability for January 6th terrorists. Judge imposing the longest sentence yet to Oath Keepers founder Stewart Rhodes, who was sentenced to 18 years in prison for the January 6th attack. He was previously convicted for seditious conspiracy. The judge telling Rhodes he, quote, presents an ongoing threat and a peril to this country and to the republic and to the very fabric of this democracy. That's bars. Eugene Robinson, what's your response to Stewart Rhodes getting an 18-year sentence for being part of the January 6th terrorist attack?
Well, that's serious time. And this judge was serious. Essentially, he's saying, yes, this was an attempt to overthrow the election and stage something like a coup. It was seditious conspiracy. It's maybe an inch or two below treason. So this is I frankly personally think it's an appropriate sentence. It certainly sends a message to anybody who's thinking about doing anything like this in the future that you're going to be spending a lot of time in a federal prison. And it also raises the question, of course, President Trump is being looked at, investigated for his role in January 6th. And as you know, the defense of many of these January 6 defendants is that we were just doing what Trump told us to do. So, again, it raises a serious question about him.
Renato, 18 years. That is a real sentence. I'm glad that he's going away. But frankly, as an American citizen who was terrified that day that my country was being overthrown by a bunch of white nationalists led by a twice impeached former president, I don't know if that's enough. And there are crazy people out there where 18 years is not necessarily going to be enough to dissuade them from their next attack. What are some other potential punishments? I mean, if Rhodes gets 18, does that mean that the sentencing for other people is likely to be less? Is it not indicative of future punishments that may come down? How can we sort of contextualize this punishment, this ruling?
Well, first of all, I think it is a significant sentence. I don't want people viewing this for them to get a takeaway that this wasn't a serious sentence or that the judge was not serious. I think he was. I think he considered this a harsh punishment. It is much higher than the other insurrectionists received for their activities, much higher. I do think it is a bit of a cap for some of these others. In other words, people who did things that were less serious than Rhodes, I think will get less than 18 years because judges do take into account the punishments that others receive. But look, 18 years isn't just a Kanye lyric. It is a lot of time. That's almost 2 decades of your. It's almost 2 decades of your life. And I think what was striking to me, Jason, was the sentence that you quoted the judge saying, that this man, Mr. Rhodes, who went to my alma mater, Yale Law School, was a serious and ongoing threat, I believe he said, to our democracy. And I think I've never heard a judge say something like that at a sentencing. I mean, usually what they're saying actually is something about how they hope the person is rehabilitated and that they see the good in the person and this is a one-time thing. None of that. I mean, this is essentially what you say about people that you want to warehouse because they think they're such a danger. Having them out there is going to be a continuing harm. So very, very interesting and important language. I think a warning from the judge.
Jason,
Renato Mariotti and
mention
Eugene Robinson. Oh, yes, Eugene, real quick, yes.
Yeah, no, there's one thing. This now becomes a political litmus test for the other Republican candidates. Donald Trump has said he may well pardon defendants in the January 6 cases. Governor DeSantis has said he would look at pardons. I think every contender for the nomination is going to be asked that question.
And we should ask him that question. Renato Mariotti and Eugene Robinson, thank you so much for starting us off today on The Beat.